And welcome to another edition of the Tom Green Podcast. The brackets are out. Whether or not we think that a few teams are in the tournament, they're in or they're out. Some coaching changes have been made on those teams that are outside of the bubble, and even one that's actually in the tournament that I'll discuss in a little bit. But nonetheless, the probably the greatest weekend in basketball is here. The first weekend of the NCAA tournament, and we're going to be talking about it here in the Tom Green Podcast. With us, we have a guest from Birmingham, Alabama, WJOX, Molly Robinson.
That was a great intro. Thank you.
WJOX absolutely is here with us. Molly, glad to introduce you in that fashion and glad to have you on the show. Looking forward to talking with you.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm excited. This is always a really fun time of year, and as you said, I'm in Birmingham, deep in the heart of SEC country, and truly wasn't a better year to cover SEC basketball other than this year.
Absolutely. And I think that's where, oh, well, first let's get started about what you do there. Of course, you're on the radio on WJOX in Birmingham, Alabama. You are part of the three-man front show as well for that station. Tell us about that to start.
Yeah, so I've been part of JOX since August of 23. I graduated college in May of 23 from the University of Nebraska. So been out almost 2 years now, but been with JOX ever since. I've loved it. As you said, I'm part of Three Man Front. It's funny, it's called Three Man Front, but there's actually four of us. It's myself, Pat Smith, Landrum Roberts, and Conrad Van Order. We all come from pretty different backgrounds, and Pat and Landrum, they're both radio geniuses. I mean, Pat created, love him or hate him for it, but he created the Paul Feinbaum show. So if there's anything to know about radio, Pat definitely knows it. He's been so much fun.
Oh,
Yes, that fine bomb, the fine bomb. So we've worked a lot with him in the past. Of course, Landrum, he's done so much play-by-play in his life too. He currently works with UAB as well, and he'll do their sidelines for the radio. And then Conrad, we're kind of the young bucks on the show. He graduated from Alabama a couple years ago in broadcast journalism, and I did the same at Nebraska. So it's been really fun to learn. I've gotten to meet so many great people through it, and like I said, being in the heart of SEC country, you get to meet a lot of cool people, cool coaches, athletes, just honestly sports legends. It's been a dream come true, and I'm really blessed that this is what I get to do in my young 2 year career so far.
absolutely. And that's a thing that I've kind of talked about a lot on this podcast since I relaunched it in January, talking to free agents in sports and talking with other people is it's not so much about what you know, it's about who you know. And you get in SEC country, you get to see a lot of people that frankly I don't get to see being in Big Ten country, but SEC country has a lot of great people, a lot of great names, great faces, and great teams. So it's good that I'm glad that you're a part of that for sure.
Thank you. And I know I mentioned it, but I am familiar with Big Ten country as well. I went to Nebraska. I partially grew up in Michigan as well. My brother went to Iowa. My sister-in-law went to Michigan. So believe me, I've spent my fair share of time in Big Ten country, and there's some great people up there too.
Absolutely. So we're getting to take from two different perspectives there from Molly Robinson for Big Ten and SEC, of course, working in the SEC now. So first, I think we're going to start there is the SEC with, of course, with the expansions that the Big Ten and SEC and other conferences have with the dissolvance of the Pac-12, and that being more ACC based, but the point being we see a lot more super conferences now, and with that, the SEC has gotten the most bids out of any league in the history of March Madness, which is 14. So I think you would be definitely somebody to talk to about that. Tell me about the depth of this league and from top to bottom how every game is a quad one game and every team can beat a team out of conference at any night.
Yeah, it's funny when I was watching the selection show on Sunday and they were announcing all the SEC teams getting in. And we've kind of talked about it all season, especially since conference play began, but they're kind of just beating each other up throughout the season. It's remarkable, really. And during the selection show, I remember sitting there counting, okay, one, two, three, four, oh, okay, five, six. Oh, wow, we're getting all the way up to 14 SEC teams. And here in SEC country, the mantra for the league is it just means more. And Who would have thought a couple of years ago, even I mean, even 3 years ago, that the SEC would break the Big East record of the most teams in the Big Dance? It's truly remarkable. I mean, the fact that you only have LSU and South Carolina sitting on the outside looking in. I mean, two of the number one seeds, the number one overall seed being Auburn belonging to the conference. But man, this has been, I mean, what a year to just cover Southeastern Conference basketball. Every game has been so much fun. And, it's kind of been really since March has started, you didn't really know what was ever going to go on. And, you kind of always say, well, oh, at this point in the season, you are who you are. But to me, it really hasn't felt that way, especially going into the SEC basketball tournament. Because, I mean, look at Auburn. I mean, Auburn's pretty much been dominant all year. Their only loss for most of the season was just their loss to Duke in the beginning. And then Auburn, they go on and they lose the last three of their four. And, everyone likes to say the stat, well, no team has ever gone and won the national championship winning or losing three of their last four. But again, that's the beautiful thing about March is that you never know what's going to happen. I mean, a one seed had never lost to a 16 seed until Maryland, Baltimore County did it. And then I think who was it? Fairleigh Dickinson beat
Yep.
Purdue a couple years ago. So that's the beauty of it. You never know what's going to happen. And, me going through the brackets right now, I still haven't like solidified my bracket yet because you want to pick chalk, but that never happens. And people always say, oh, well, it might this year. Of course, you had UConn winning it all last year, and everyone kind of predicted that. But I don't know. I have a feeling we might get a lot of drama, and I hope we see a lot of Cinderellas this year. Now, I guess the Cinderellas from the SEC could be like Texas, who plays tonight, and then Oklahoma was one of the teams that we always kind of saw, maybe on the berth, because when you look at their conference record, it was a little scary. But I
Yep.
mean, after they won a couple games in the SEC tournament. Now they're in the tournament. So who I never would have thought, but like I said, this has been a remarkable year for and people love it down here. I mean, granted, football is king, don't get me wrong, but it's been a nice change of pace, I will say.
Yeah, and then anybody that watches ESPN would probably hear this phrase too, and I agree with it. This didn't start this year. This started 6 to 10 years ago when Greg Sankey took over the SEC and
Yeah.
saw how horrible the basketball was in that conference at that time and said, "Hey, we got to change this." So in comes Rick Barnes to Tennessee. In comes, well, at one time, Jerry Stackhouse to Vanderbilt, but that Bryce Drew to Vanderbilt as well. The replacement, name is escaping me right now, but Vanderbilt is a 10 seed right now.
Yeah.
Bruce Pearl was in some peril in 2014 at Tennessee.
Mhm.
He's
Oh
at
yeah.
let's see, though Todd Golden to Florida. Of course, it was Billy Donovan for a lot of years until he went up to the NBA. So there's just a few, and I don't have any notes in front of me. I kind of do this ad lib, but the point being is this didn't. When you have success like that, it doesn't start with immediate success. It
No,
comes
absolutely not.
years
Yeah.
in advance, and it's been a change of pace for the Southeast for sure.
And, we actually talked about that a little bit on the show yesterday, kind of the rise of SEC basketball. And, thank you, Greg Sankey, honestly. And, you can kind of, one of the questions that Pat had asked us was, what do you think led to it? One of the things that I said was money, because, part of greatness, especially these days in college athletics, is you got to have the dollar bills and being able to invest in great coaches, like you said, Rick Barnes or Bruce Pearl, and even great athletes as well. And, NIL has definitely changed the game because, these SEC schools, they can find some money. That's for sure.
Yeah, and another name that just came up to my head was Nate Oates, who used to coach
Absolutely.
Romulus High School in Michigan, went to University of Buffalo, and then went to Alabama. And a lot of people were doubting that hire, and all of a sudden, Alabama basketball is being talked about like Alabama football has been. And I would think that being in those SEC schools, even as a Michigan fan, as yours truly is, you want to see the basketball team as successful as the football team because you want that success to sustain from September all the way to April.
Yeah, absolutely. And, one of my coworkers is a huge Alabama fan. And I remember talking to him last year when Alabama made their Final Four run. like, would you trade a football national championship for a basketball national championship? He was like, oh, absolutely, I would. But I mean, again, Alabama, they've got football national championships to burn. Like, they have so many. Like, I always lose track of however many. It's like what, 18 now or something. I can never, because again, I'm a Nebraska fan. I'm still reliving the 90s. Even though I wasn't born yet, I still want to go back to the 90s. But yeah, we had asked him, would you trade a football natty for a basketball natty? And he was like, oh, yeah, absolutely. But if you were to ask him that 5, 10 years ago, he probably would have said, absolutely not. There's no shot. But, it's March. Like I said, anything can happen. That's the beauty of the sport.
Exactly. And as far as Nebraska's case is, I think Matt Rule is doing a very nice job trying to rebuild that program.
Yeah, as someone that was a student during the Frost era, this has been, it's been a
Oh,
nice
so
change.
close.
It's been a nice change of coaching. It's a different feel with Matt Rule, and that's nothing against Scott Frost, but too many one-score losses for me. Way
Mhm.
too many. I think my junior year was the year Nebraska went 3-9 and lost every game by like 10 or less points. I think our worst defeat was against Ohio State, and I think they beat us either by like a touchdown or by 10 points, and then every other game was either by a touchdown or a field goal.
Mhm. And the thing is, even though I stood as a Michigan fan, I did find myself rooting for Scott Frost. It's like I want to see him win. I
You
want
want to see them win, right? It's just too many close calls. And we still have them with Matt Rule. We're getting better. We're finally winning some of those games. We finally went to a bowl game for the first time in, I think, 8 years, beat Boston College in the Pinstripe Bowl. But, I'm just hoping that we can get back to above 500 and stay above 500. And I think every Husker fan kind of has that same sentiment as well.
absolutely. So now switching topics to if you're watching on the video feed, to the thing that is behind her on the wall, and that is the wall bracket. So, give me the details there. I did see that you or that three-man for the show there posted a
Yeah.
tweet about it, and it was from you. The construction of that. So walk me through it. I mean, that's quite a good construction there you've got behind you.
Well, thank you. So every year, you always see people kind of post painter's tape brackets where they'll either use a projector or like use a ruler or something. And I thought, I have an apartment, I have adult money. I want to do that. I want to try it. It's always been something I've wanted to try because every year I print out back brackets and I fill them out, but I want a life-size bracket because I have this huge wall right next to my TV where, I can put the quad screen up or whatever. So I'm like, I want a nice visual. And so I went to Target on Sunday and I bought a roll of painter's tape and a thing of index cards. And I have a little one thing I was really worried about is my height because I'm only 5'3" and it goes up pretty high. So I have a little step stool that I'll that I'll use for like my higher cabinets.
Mhm.
And I started cutting pieces of tape, hoping that they were all around the same size. And I just started placing them. And I will say the hardest part was the round of 64. That took me the longest. Once I got that round done, the rest of it went by pretty quick because I didn't use a ruler or anything. I didn't use a ruler. I didn't use a projector. I didn't like this was 100% free-handed, which I take a lot of pride in that I did it 100% free-handed. Um, so I was able to place some kind of gauge where I wanted everything. And it was constant going back and forth to make sure, each line was even or whatever. And then the bracket just started to form. And once I kind of got to the Sweet 16 is when it really started to come together. But yeah, I'm really proud of my creation. And right now I have index cards for the round of 64, which is each team written down, but I don't have it on me right now. And actually, my boss did this for me, which was so nice of him because I don't have a printer here at my apartment. But he printed off like I guess a decent sized logo of most of the teams so that when they do move on, I can actually add the logo and then, add some tape on the back end and move them on. So, but yeah, it was a lot of fun. I think the whole thing took me because I started cutting the tape when the selection show started and I cut tape as I watched the show. Um, and I was done with that pretty early. And then once the show was over, I started, forming my bracket. The whole thing took me about 2 hours probably.
Gotcha. Now,
And
yeah,
a lot of that, like I said, was going back and forth, going up and down my step ladder and like between, trying to reach. But yeah, I would say probably about 2 hours.
yeah, and I would say on a freehand job, I think you did. I think you did fairly well, and I'm looking forward to seeing that as the bracket progresses. That's for sure. Because here's mine, just the
Yeah.
regular sheet of paper, the sheet of integrity they call it, the sheet of paper, and then probably in a couple weeks we'll be going.
Yeah. Now, I will say I am going to post updates. So throughout each round, I will post updates of me moving, I guess, moving the teams, moving the logos, if you will, onto the next round. So there will
Gotcha.
be updates.
Gotcha. And so I do have to bring it up because I saw this on John Rothstein's Twitter.
Mhm.
Um, Ryan Allen Cluck posted, my wife let me take down wedding pictures to put this up. I married correctly. And it was a wall bracket that's probably twice the size of yours because, of course, he has more space. But John Rothstein reposted and said, this is March. So I do have to ask comparison. What do you think?
You know what? His is good. Like you said, his is a lot bigger than mine. But I applaud him for it. And I would love to see how the construction went. Because like I said, not to brag, but mine was 100% free-handed. But his does look really good. And he actually has logos. Like I said, I don't have a printer. So shout out to my one of my coworkers for printing those out for me. But no, his looks really good. And maybe one day, like if I do have my own house or a bigger wall at my apartment. I'm hopefully my future husband will let me do that too.
There you go. So, all righty, moving towards the brackets here. And like we're saying, the round of 64 is just so daunting. In fact, I remember when I did my freelance sort of a conception of this show when I was in high school. This is kind of when I started doing shows, freelance shows like this. I walked around my basement and talked about every single round of 64 game, and it took an hour. So
Wow.
pretty obvious we're not going to talk about every single round of 64 game, but the big thing is upsets. That's kind of where we'll go about round of 64 is what are some of the upsets that you have in mind from this bracket?
See, one of the teams that I've really been eyeballing, and maybe honestly, this is probably just recency bias, even into last year's bracket, but I'm kind of looking at Yale and Texas A&M just because we know that Yale is battle tested for a spot like this. I mean, look at last year. Last year, Auburn, I don't remember what the odds were, but they were one of the favorites to win the national championship. A lot of people had them winning the whole thing, beating a UConn or beating a Duke. So I think Yale might come out and surprise some people. Now, again, can they do it 2 years in a row? Beating an SEC team, we will just have to see. But they are the home for the Ivy League Player of the Year, so maybe they could be another first round upset like we saw last year. I remember last year I was in Memphis for the first round because Nebraska actually played Texas A&M at the FedEx Forum in Memphis,
Mhm.
and I remember I think that game. I think it went off right before the Texas A&M Nebraska game. And I remember kind of being out, in the walkway or whatever the thing is called, where you like by the concessions watching the game with my dad, like, well, my bracket's busted because I had Auburn going pretty far last year. Not necessarily a Final Four run, but what Alabama did last year, I had Auburn actually doing in my bracket. So that was definitely a shock. I've seen a lot of people talk about Drake as well. And no, not like the rapper Drake, but Drake, the Jersey Bulldogs.
Bennett, Sturts,
Um,
and Drake. Yep.
I think they're great on defense as well. I've seen a lot of people talk about Colorado State, and another team I've seen is McNeese. But I feel like McNeese is one of those teams every year where I pick them and they always do me wrong, if that makes sense. I think last year I had them going to my Sweet 16 and they lost in the first round. So, but again, like I've been saying, that's the thing about March. It's literally impossible to predict every single game. And another one is UC Santa Barbara going up against Michigan.
San
A lot
Diego, you
of,
mean, but
or
yes.
yeah, San Diego. Um, I've seen a lot of people really high on them. I don't know how I feel about that one yet because the way I see it is kind of the way I see Florida as well. The hype once everyone gets really hype around a team, again, last UConn last year was the exception, but it's like I don't know. It's one of those things where it's like there's so much hype. I don't know if I want to follow that hype train, if that makes sense. So
Yeah, I get that. And I would agree that there's always one upset that somebody, at least where I think this upset is going to happen, and nobody's looking at it, and then the team that's supposed to upset wins by like 20, and
right.
you look terrible for it, and that
Yeah.
and let's see, the last one I remember that I got completely embarrassingly wrong was if you remember Casper Ware and Long Beach State in 2013, I had them going to the
Huh?
Sweet 16 and they lost by like 10. It's like, oh, yeah, that
Yeah.
looks bad. And typically, though, it's typically Yale is the team that screws my bracket. This year I picked it
I see. I picked him too.
over
Honestly.
A&M
Hmm.
because I think they have a couple of great point guards and their coach has been very experienced in this
Yeah.
NCAA tournament. So I like that upset. Drake, I like the camaraderie of the D2 players going to D1 and pretty much picking up where they left off with tournament experience. I think that they can beat Mizzou for sure. McNeese, I like what Will Wade is doing at McNeese, but I believe I heard a rumor that he's signing with NC State.
He is. Yes, he will be their next head coach. So, and plus, I think didn't Will Wade go to Clemson?
I don't believe so. I can't remember it off the top of my head,
I'm
but
looking it up.
there we go. But you have that as well.
He did. He went to Clemson. I was about to say this is. I don't want to say it's like a homecoming, but he is going up against his old school. So kind of interesting. But again, with the whole NC State thing, I don't know if his head will necessarily be in the game.
So that could be a change there in the bracket too. I've also got Utah State over UCLA,
Okay. Yeah, I like that.
Liberty over Oregon,
Okay. Wow.
BYU to the Elite Eight or BYU to the Sweet 16, beating
Okay.
Wisconsin around to 32. Iowa State's injury, I have Ole Miss to the Elite Eight.
See, I've seen Ole Miss as another upset pick, like
Okay.
the playing team beating. I think
In
because
North Carolina.
yes, yeah, yeah, yeah. Again, I'm still trying to like memorize the bracket, but I knew they had to take on one of the playing teams. I've seen them as a popular upset pick too, but I don't want to like bring out SEC bias or anything. But I like Ole Miss.
Hey, that's all right. You can see this is the amount of notes I've taken for the show. So that's a ad
Right.
lib. We vibe here. That's what we do here. So good deal on the upsets. Who for first before we get to the final four, we got to mention I got to mention Bruce Pearl's press conference after the SEC semifinal. Yeah, you guys have lost 3 or 4 games going into the NCAA tournament. Are you scared? Yeah, we're scared. What a
What kind of
softball
question
question.
is
We're scared. Yeah, we're scared. We lost to three top quad one teams. Yeah, we're scared. So that tells me look out for Auburn.
See, and I have to give a shout out to Ryan Hennessy because with the NBC station here in Birmingham, because he was the one that asked that question, and he's a great friend of the show. We have him on the program all the time, and our coworkers were all texting him like, that was a great question, by the way. We're glad that you asked that because I don't know the way I see it, and I know I kind of touched on it earlier, where no team, everyone talks about the stat. Well, no team has ever won the whole thing when they've lost the last three of their last four. But if I'm Bruce Pearl, honestly, don't you kind of want to be in this situation where everyone is doubting you going into the tournament so that you can prove them wrong? I mean, that again, like that's the thing about March. People always talk about stats and history, but why don't you break that history? Like, a Maryland, Baltimore County or a Fairleigh Dickinson or whoever it might be. And plus, we had Mike Griffith on the show, who's a writer for the AJC and Dog Nation over in Atlanta. And he was talking about how, this is kind of, he sees this as Auburn's revenge tour, going up against schools that have beaten some of his really good Tennessee teams in the past. And again, just being in this situation where everyone's like, well, forget about Auburn. They've lost three of their last four. Like, no, no, no. We want to be in this position. Like, keep doubting us. We remember what everyone said about us last year when we lost to Yale. Like, well, don't worry, because I'm with you on that. I still like Auburn. I still think that they can make some waves in the tournament. I'm hoping for my bracket's sake. And I guess, for me, obviously, kind of veering off of Bruce Pearl, but Florida, everyone's been really high on Florida, and I do like Florida, but again, sometimes just too much hype worries me personally. Personally.
Yeah, absolutely. And that'll kind of be going to my next question here, Final Four national championship. Yes, I agree, by the way, that that was a very legitimate question as media members. It's like, yeah, you kind of got to ask that. I know
We,
that it's going to PO the coach, but
yeah.
it's a very legitimate question that has to be asked because
Right.
It's truth. It happened.
Well, and it's like, what are
So,
you gonna do to make your team, kind of play with an edge again, play like they have a chip on their shoulder, something to prove. They're looking a little lackadaisical. It's now you're at the point where like you lose and you go home. Like the season's over, it's done with, and you've had this historic run. People want to see success because for Auburn fans, you won the SEC regular season title, you lost in the tournament. Okay, does the tournament really matter anymore? But it's like if I'm an Auburn fan, I'm expecting Final Four or bust based on the way the season has gone. I'm expecting good big things out of this team if I'm a fan.
absolutely. So that'll go to the next question here, the final four. My final four, as we speak now, is Auburn,
Okay.
St. John's, Duke, Houston.
Okay, I like the St. John's pick, and that also brings me back. We have the potential to have a Coach Cal versus Coach Pitino matchup with Arkansas and St. I want that so bad.
I've got it
I
in my
want
bracket.
Arkansas. Okay, good. Nothing against Bill Self in Kansas, but I would love to see Coach Cal versus Pitino. Um,
Yeah.
I'm still working on my bracket. I have because I'm the type of person where and this usually comes back to bite me, but I love stats, and I love data, and I love patterns. So I tend to base my bracket off of that. But then, every year in the ESPN Bracket Challenge app, I usually do one based off of mascots or colors just for fun. Um, but in the West, I'm trying to think back to my ESPN one. I think I have Florida and I think I have Auburn in the
Okay.
South. And then I think I have Duke losing. I didn't pick Alabama, but I don't think I have Wisconsin. I'll have to go back and look. Um, and see, it's so easy. I've seen a lot of people too pick like Auburn, Florida, Alabama, Tennessee, just like just all SEC Final Four, which that'd be great for my job personally. I
Absolutely.
also I know you won't like to hear this. I'm curious to see how Michigan State will do too. I've always liked watching Michigan State in March, especially Izzo. He's a fun coach. And growing up in Michigan, one of my favorite memories was, being able to watch March Madness on the big projector screen during lunch and not have to go sit in the lunchroom. And so
Shout
many
out
friends from
to
Michigan
all
State.
the teachers that do
Yep,
that because they are the true OGs. Let me
they
tell
are.
let me tell you. So, national championship pick. Who you got winning it all?
See, I keep going back and forth between mainly Auburn and Duke, which I know is so the kind of the cliche answer that everyone's been talking about all year. But I would love to see Auburn and Duke in the national championship because I mean it would be a rematch from what we saw in the beginning of the season. I Again, this is just me bringing out my SEC bias. I would love to see Auburn win it all, especially with kind of some of the recent doubt and the slide that we've seen the this part of March. I have Auburn and Duke. You know what? I'll take Auburn to win it. Again, I haven't completely finished my bracket yet. This is me sitting here at
Totally fine.
8:07 Central Time saying this.
That's fine.
It
I've
could
got
change
Auburn.
by midnight tonight.
There you go. I've got Auburn and Houston in the national championship. I like Houston's defense. In fact,
Okay.
I picked Houston last year to beat UConn, and the only team that stopped them was Duke because I thought only one team could stop that UConn machine, and it was Houston. I
Yep.
like Houston's defense. Defense wins championships. I've got them going all the way, 62 to 58 over Auburn.
And you know what? That's a pick I haven't really seen in my part of the country, at least. I mean, everyone down here has either picked Auburn, Florida, Alabama, or Tennessee to win the whole thing. So I like to see Houston.
There you go. So, well, unfortunately, my Zoom limits me. So, we're down to about 2 minutes on the Zoom counter. So, is there anything else that you would like to add to this March Madness preview on the show?
Oh, well, I guess I just hope that one year Nebraska will finally get their first NCAA tournament win because we're the only, I guess, like Power Six school in
Mhm.
college basketball that has yet to win a first round game. So hopefully here in the next couple of years we can change that.
There we go. Definitely appreciate having you on the show, especially on short notice. And
Yeah, thank
I'm glad
you.
that this worked. And I'm hoping for some good numbers not only on the show, but I hope some people down south will listen to it too and see what we have to offer here. So definitely glad to have you on the show.
Yeah, thank you so much. It was a lot of fun.
Absolutely. She is Molly Robinson. This has been the Tom Green Podcast.